The night Los Angeles took Luna Nozawa from the world, it also took something invisible yet far more enduring: peace. The city, glittering with light and promise, became for one family a labyrinth of ghosts, where every sound carried the memory of a laugh that would never echo again. Months passed, and Luna's name slowly faded from the headlines. The police reports were filed away, the press moved on, and those closest to her clung to the fragile illusion of healing. But grief has a way of lingering in the bloodline. It sinks deep, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And on a gray morning drenched in salt air, when the waves crashed mercilessly against the Malibu cliffs, that dormant grief returned, in the form of a woman whose presence felt like a storm breaking through silence. Her name was Aria Nozawa. Few remembered her. Fewer still knew she existed. Luna's younger sister had disappeared from public life years ago, retreating into the anonymity of Tokyo's underground art scene, painting faces she could not forgive and stories she could not forget. But when news reached her of Luna's death, its mystery, its cruelty, and the way it had been so conveniently swept under the rug, something inside her fractured. The world that had stolen her sister would now feel the full weight of what it had created. Aria's return to Los Angeles was deliberate, calculated, and cloaked in deception. She stepped off the plane wearing her sister's scent, her sister's jewelry, her sister's quiet grace, an echo so uncanny that those who glimpsed her did double takes. She did not come to mourn. She came to dismantle. To her, grief was not a weakness. It was a weapon sharpened by every sleepless night since Luna's last breath. Her first stop was not the Nozawa family's modest apartment, now locked and dust-covered, but the city's heart, Forrester Creations, where Luna had once poured her energy, her designs, her dreams. Aria walked through the polished corridors as if she belonged there, her forged credentials flawless, her demeanor serene. She introduced herself under a different name, Aya Tsukino, a textile consultant from Kyoto. No one questioned her. Her calm confidence disarmed suspicion. But behind her polite smiles and professional tone, she studied everyone she met. Will Spencer, whose charm and privilege seemed endless. Electra, whose ambition shone brighter than her conscience. Dylan, Luna's old friend who had once sworn to protect her, and Finn Finnegan, whose tangled family history had brushed too close to Luna's final days. They all carried pieces of the truth, and Aria would extract each one, no matter how deep she had to cut. Her revenge began not with violence but with infiltration. Aria understood that true destruction came from within, not from outside attacks. She made herself indispensable, her ideas fresh, her presence intoxicating. Within weeks, she had gained Will's attention, not just professionally, but personally. He found her mysterious, magnetic, a woman who reminded him of something he couldn't name. It was, of course, Luna, the very aura Aria cultivated with meticulous precision. Every smile she gave him was a blade hidden in silk. But revenge is never clean. It blurs lines between love and hate, between justice and obsession. As Aria drew closer to Will, she began to see not just the man connected to her sister's pain, but a reflection of her own loneliness. He was kind, in ways she hadn't expected, vulnerable, in ways she hadn't planned for. And though she told herself it was all part of the plan, to make him trust her, to make him fall, to destroy him, there were moments when she almost believed the tenderness between them was real. Almost. It was Electra who first sensed something wrong. Luna's death had left her with a gnawing guilt she tried to bury beneath her glamorous facade. When she met Aria, that guilt began to fester again. There was something too familiar in the woman's eyes, something that seemed to look straight through her. One evening, after a tense meeting about the upcoming fashion showcase, Electra caught Aria lingering over Luna's old sketches, her fingers tracing the lines with reverence that didn't belong to a stranger. "You knew her," Electra said quietly. Aria looked up, her expression unreadable. "Everyone here knew her," she replied. But the answer was too smooth, too practiced. Electra began to investigate. And in doing so, she unknowingly stepped into Arya's web. The closer she came to the truth, the more Arya manipulated her fears, whispering half-truths about Will, about Dylan, about who had really been there the night Luna died. "You think you know what happened," Arya said one evening, her voice soft, almost kind. "But you don't know the last person who saw her alive." It was a lie, but a purposeful one. Lies, to Arya, were tools, delicate threads she wove until her targets strangled themselves with them. She wanted chaos. She wanted guilt to surface like oil on water, poisoning everyone who had ever benefited from her sister's silence. Still, the closer she got to her enemies, the more she began to remember Luna not as the idealized victim she'd built in her mind, but as a flawed, frightened woman caught in forces larger than herself. Luna had loved recklessly, trusted blindly, and paid the ultimate price. Arya had promised herself she would never make those same mistakes, but vengeance, she was learning, could make even the most disciplined heart falter. Her most dangerous encounter came with Finn Finnegan. Unlike the others, Finn did not fear her. He studied her. He had known Luna briefly, and though their paths had crossed professionally, he had never been part of her inner circle. Yet something about Aya Tsukino unsettled him deeply. He saw the way she flinched at Luna's name, the way her accent slipped when she was angry, the way her eyes, so full of sorrow and fire, never matched her words. One afternoon, he confronted her gently. "Who are you really?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Someone who remembers what everyone else forgot." Finn told Steffi about his suspicions, but she dismissed them at first. "You're letting old wounds talk," she said. "Luna's gone. Let her rest." But rest was a luxury no one in this story would be granted. When the fashion showcase finally arrived, a tribute to Luna's legacy and the new collection inspired by her designs, Arya's plan reached its crescendo. The entire Forrester Spencer circle was there, glittering under the chandeliers, unaware that the woman behind the curtain was about to dismantle them all. As the show began, Arya stood backstage, watching models glide across the runway, wearing Luna's creations, pieces her sister had never lived to see completed. The sight filled her with a mixture of pride and fury. They had taken Luna's art, her vision, and turned it into spectacle. They had made her sister's tragedy into beauty. The finale was supposed to feature a speech by Will Spencer, dedicating the collection to Luna's enduring spirit. But before he could take the stage, the lights flickered, the sound system crackled, and Arya's voice filled the room. "This isn't about spirit," she said, her tone calm and deadly. "This is about guilt." The screens behind the runway came alive with footage, surveillance clips, hidden audio, private recordings Arya had spent months collecting. Conversations between executives about Luna's instability, Dylan's drunken confession that he'd covered for a friend, Elektra's tearful phone call the night of the accident. And finally, a video of Luna herself, crying, pleading with someone unseen. The words were faint, but the message was clear. She had been betrayed, used, silenced. Gasps filled the room. Will froze in shock, his face draining of color. Elektra stumbled backward, shaking. Dylan buried his face in his hands. And in the chaos that followed, Arya stepped onto the runway, her identity revealed under the harsh, white lights. "My name is Arya Nozawa," she declared. "Luna's sister. The woman you all buried with your lies." Security rushed forward, but no one could stop the truth from detonating. The empire of glamour and secrecy that had built itself over Luna's grave was collapsing in real time. Brooke Logan tried to calm the crowd. Ridge shouted for order, but it was too late. The damage was done. Arya stood at the center of the storm, watching the people who had destroyed her sister turn on each other, their alliances crumbling. For a moment, she felt triumph, a savage satisfaction that justice had finally been served. But as she looked out at the sea of terrified faces, she felt something colder seep in. This wasn't victory. It was emptiness. Luna wasn't coming back. And the pain in her chest hadn't lessened. It had only changed shape. Later, when the chaos had subsided and the police had escorted her away, Arya sat in the back of the car, staring out at the city lights. She thought of Luna's laughter, of the way she used to hum while she worked, of the letters she had never answered. She thought of how grief had turned her into something unrecognizable, how love, twisted by rage, had become indistinguishable from hate. When Will visited her days later, his voice was soft, almost broken. "You didn't have to destroy everything," he said. "Luna wouldn't have wanted this." Arya looked at him, her eyes hollow. "You think you knew what Luna wanted?" she whispered. "None of you did. You all wanted pieces of her, the beauty, the talent, the story. But no one wanted the truth." As he left, she finally allowed herself to cry, the tears silent and relentless. She had avenged her sister, but in doing so, she had erased herself. There would be no redemption, no forgiveness. Only the echo of Luna's voice, forever trapped between memory and regret. In the months that followed, Los Angeles moved on, as it always does. The scandal faded, new stories took its place, and the fashion world rebuilt its image. But those who had been there never forgot the night Arya Nozawa turned grief into fire. Some called her a villain. Others called her a martyr. But those who looked deeper understood. She was neither. She was a mirror, reflecting the darkness that had always been there, the price of ambition, the cost of silence. And somewhere, in a small studio overlooking the Pacific, a single unfinished canvas waited. On it was Luna's face, half-painted, half-shadowed, her eyes serene as though forgiving the world that had failed her. Arya had begun it before she left Japan and never finished. Perhaps she never would. Perhaps that was the point. Because revenge, like art, is never complete. It only leaves behind the haunting outline of what might have been, and the ache of everything that was lost along the way. The afternoon sun filtered through the stained-glass windows of the Forrester mansion, casting long golden rays across the living room where silence hung like a weight no one dared to lift. Donna Logan sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the folded medical papers in her lap. She had read them too many times already, hoping that if she looked long enough, the words would somehow change, the diagnosis would vanish, and the nightmare would dissolve into relief. But the words remained sharp and merciless: rapidly progressive neurodegenerative disorder. They had been echoing in her head for days, wrapping around every heartbeat, every breath. Eric Forrester, the man who had built an empire with vision and artistry, the man who had given the fashion world its most enduring legacy, was fading, not in the quiet grace of age, but in the cruel, unstoppable erosion of his mind and body. Donna had promised herself she would wait until the right moment to tell the family. She wanted it to be calm, private, respectful. But there was no such thing as the right moment to shatter a dynasty. When she finally called Ridge, Steffi, and Brooke to the mansion, her voice had been steady, but her soul quaked beneath the surface. They arrived within the hour, each wearing that familiar mask of poised concern, the kind only the Forresters could manage in the face of crisis. But as they stepped into the room and saw the look in Donna's eyes, those masks began to crumble. "Is it bad?" Ridge's voice broke the silence first, low and cautious, as though he already knew the answer. Donna looked at him, at all of them, the family she had loved, fought with, and held together through decades of triumph and tragedy, and then at the staircase where Eric's footsteps no longer echoed as they once had. "It's worse than bad," she whispered. "It's something we can't fight with money or medicine. It's something that will take him away from us piece by piece." The words landed with a quiet violence. Brooke gasped softly, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. Steffi looked as though the ground had shifted beneath her. And Ridge, always the strongest, the most composed, stood motionless, his expression unreadable, his breath caught in the space between denial and despair. "He has a neurodegenerative disease," Donna continued, her voice faltering. "It's rare, and it's progressing faster than anyone expected. The doctors said the changes will come suddenly. Confusion, memory loss, coordination problems. He'll have good days and bad days, but eventually she couldn't bring herself to finish." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock, a cruel reminder of how swiftly time was moving. Then Ridge turned away, his fists clenched. "No," he said under his breath. "No, that's not possible."
"Dad's fine."
"He's still designing, still working, he's not." "Ridge," Brooke said softly, reaching for him, but he pulled back. "He's not dying," Ridge snapped, though his voice cracked on the last word. "He's Eric Forrester. He's built this company, this family. He doesn't just fade away. He fights." Donna's eyes filled with tears. "He has been fighting. You just didn't see it. The tremors, the memory lapses, the fatigue, it's been happening for months. He didn't want anyone to know. He said he didn't want pity, and he didn't want the company to lose faith in him. He wanted to go out standing, not stumbling." The truth broke over them in waves, pulling each of them under in different ways. Brooke sank into the nearest chair, tears streaking her face as memories of decades with Eric flashed through her mind, the man who had once saved her from ruin, who had taught her the meaning of elegance and loyalty. Steffi's thoughts raced to Forrester Creations, the empire her grandfather had built with his hands, his name, his soul. What would happen to it now? And Ridge, torn between grief and anger, felt something darker stirring within him. The man he had spent his life trying to surpass was slipping away, and with that, the foundation of his own identity began to crack. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Eric appeared in the doorway, his posture still regal despite the subtle tremor in his hand. His eyes, though tired, still held that unmistakable spark of pride. "You're all here," he said with a small smile. "Good. I wanted to talk to you anyway." Donna tried to rise, but Eric gestured for her to stay seated. "I know what you're all thinking," he continued, his voice firm. "Donna told you, didn't she?" No one answered. He nodded, the faintest hint of sadness passing over his features. "I figured she would. And she was right to. There's no use hiding from it now. I'm sick. It's not something I can design my way out of. But I need you to understand I am not done. Not yet." His words carried the weight of command, but behind them was a fragility none of them had ever seen in him before. "Forrester Creations has always been more than a company to me. It's our legacy, our art, our name. And I'll be damned if I let this disease take that away from me before I'm ready." Ridge stood, unable to contain himself any longer. "Dad, you don't have to pretend," he said. "We'll handle it. I'll handle it. You can rest." Eric's gaze snapped to his son, sharp as ever. "Rest," he said coldly. "That's what you want me to do? Lie down and let you take my company before I'm even gone?" "That's not what I meant," Ridge said quickly, but Eric's voice cut through him like a blade. "Don't you dare tell me when to stop creating. I've built this with my own 2 hands. When my hands stop working, then you can talk to me about stepping aside." Donna moved toward him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Eric, please," she whispered. "You need to take care of yourself." He softened slightly at her touch, but kept his gaze locked on Ridge. "I'm not ready to give up control," he said. "And I expect you all to respect that." But Ridge couldn't let it go. The moment Eric left the room, he turned to Steffi and Brooke, his voice tense with barely restrained fury. "He's in denial. You saw him, his hands shaking, his mind slipping. If he keeps pushing himself, he's going to collapse, and when that happens, everything he built goes with him. The press will find out, the investors will panic, and the company will be in freefall. Someone has to step in." "Someone," Brooke repeated softly. "Or you?" Ridge's jaw tightened. "I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for him, for all of us." But Steffi could see it in his eyes, the same fire that had driven every Forrester conflict before. This wasn't just about responsibility. It was about power, about legacy, about the son finally taking his father's place. In the days that followed, tension rippled through the family, like cracks spreading through glass. Eric insisted on returning to the design office, sketching for hours even as his hands betrayed him. Donna hovered constantly, torn between protecting him and honoring his wishes. Ridge tried to maintain his composure, but the sight of his father struggling ignited both his love and his resentment. Meetings grew tense. Decisions were questioned. And in the midst of it all, the question loomed over them like a specter. Who would lead Forrester Creations when Eric could no longer stand at its helm? Steffi, ever pragmatic, urged unity. "We can't let this tear us apart," she said one evening as she sat between Ridge and Brooke in the boardroom. "If Dad sees us fighting, it'll destroy him faster than the illness." But Ridge's patience was unraveling. "You think I don't know that? I'm watching him fade in front of me, and none of you are doing anything. If we don't take control now, we'll lose everything." Brooke's voice rose, breaking through the tension. "You mean you'll take control? This isn't about protecting your father, it's about proving you're better than him. You've been chasing his approval your whole life, Ridge. And now that he's sick, you finally think you can win." The words struck deep. Ridge's face hardened, but he said nothing. He didn't have to. The truth of her accusation lingered between them, undeniable and cruel. Meanwhile, Eric's condition began to worsen. The once unshakable man who had commanded boardrooms and runways alike now sometimes lost his words mid-sentence. He forgot meetings. He repeated conversations. There were days when he seemed lucid, full of ideas and energy, but others when the fog descended, and he barely recognized the faces around him. Donna hid her tears behind a smile, but the others began to realize that the man they loved was slipping away one memory at a time. The breaking point came during a crucial presentation for Forrester's new collection. Eric insisted on leading it himself, despite Donna's protests. The entire team gathered in the showroom, cameras ready, journalists waiting. For a moment, Eric seemed his old self, confident, charming, the master of his craft. But halfway through his speech, his hands began to tremble. His words faltered. He looked down at his sketches, his expression clouding with confusion. Silence filled the room. Donna rushed to his side, whispering his name, but he looked at her with blank eyes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I can't remember what I was saying." The murmurs spread. Ridge stepped forward, gently taking the microphone from his father's hand. "Thank you, Dad," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take it from here." That moment, the quiet transfer of authority, was the beginning of the end. Afterward, Eric shut himself in his office for hours, refusing to see anyone. When Ridge finally entered, he found his father sitting in the dark, the sketches torn, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "You humiliated me," Eric whispered. "I saved you," Ridge replied softly. "You saved yourself," Eric shot back. "You've wanted that chair your whole life. Don't pretend this was mercy." Ridge wanted to deny it, but the truth hung heavy between them. All his life, he had been chasing Eric's approval, his legacy, his power. And now, with the empire finally within reach, it felt hollow. Over the following weeks, Ridge took over as acting CEO, while Donna managed Eric's care. The press release framed it as a temporary health leave, but within the company walls, everyone knew the truth. Eric Forrester's reign had ended. The man who had built an empire was now confined to the quiet corners of his own home, his mind a labyrinth of fading light. And yet, even as his memory slipped, fragments of the old Eric remained, his sharp instincts, his pride, his unyielding will. On his good days, he would still wander into the design studio, studying the mannequins, adjusting a hem, correcting a line. Ridge watched from the doorway one afternoon, unseen, as his father murmured to himself, "It's still beautiful, isn't it? Even if it's not mine anymore." Ridge's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he understood that his father's legacy was not something to seize, but something to preserve. It wasn't about power or titles. It was about creation, about beauty, about love. In the months that followed, Ridge dedicated himself to honoring that legacy. He rebuilt Forrester Creations not as his own empire, but as his father's living memory. Donna remained at Eric's side, finding comfort in small moments, the rare smiles, the quiet recognition in his eyes. And though the disease continued its merciless progression, Eric never lost the spark that made him who he was. One evening, as the sun set over the mansion, Ridge sat beside his father, showing him the sketches for the next collection. Eric studied them for a long time, his hands trembling as he traced the lines. "You did good, son," he said finally, his voice faint but clear. Ridge looked at him, tears slipping down his face. "I learned from the best." And in that moment, beneath the dying light, the battle between father and son finally ended, not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The empire would endure, the name would live on, and even as Eric's memories faded into the shadows, the legacy of his artistry, his passion, and his love would remain etched forever into the fabric of Forrester Creations and into the hearts of everyone who bore his name.